right, thank you for joining me for the lecture on the organization of the Russian state, the political structure of Russia, and Russia's executive branch. Please remember that while you're interacting with the lecture and the PowerPoint today, that I do expect you to be taking lecture notes. You are accountable for all of the information in all of the video lectures, and your solid understanding of the content um, really helps make class run smoothly. In fact, many of the activities that we do in class now that we are using this different structure are completely dependent on your knowledge of this. So please make sure that the questions you answer in the Google form below are answered using the lecture. They can also be answered using some of the reading in the textbook. So just to start off, a history of the organization of the Russian state. During the Soviet period, the Communist Party of the Soviet Union, short CPSU, was really the authoritative leader of the state. The top party group was called the Politburo, which was really the heartbeat and the pulse of the Communist Party. The Politburo would choose candidates for lower party positions, and then those lower party positions would elect individuals to higher party positions. So it was a lot of give and take there, and ensured that everybody within the Communist Party was really had values that were aligned to the party's mission. Many of the high-ranking bureaucrats and officials in the government during the Soviet period were appointed to positions through an organization that we have gone over before called the Nomenklatura, which was just a system of personnel selection. And in this selection process, the Communist Party maintained control over the appointment of important officials who, in their eyes, could be politically reliable. And this would help the Communist Party control spheres of economic, social, and political life. So really what it boils down to is that every aspect of life during the Soviet period was overseen by the Communist Party. In return, the Communist Party said it had the interests of all the citizens in mind, so they really needn't worry. Under Gorbachev, things shifted just slightly. The Communist Party's dominance diminished slightly. He brought some competitive elections to the Soviet Union, and he tried to bring Russia closer to a more liberal democracy. This doesn't fully happen or more closely happen until Yeltsin. Boris Yeltsin is the first popularly elected president. He will talk about his recommendation of the 1993 Constitution, which was adopted by referendum. And because it was adopted by referendum, it was given the legitimacy that it needed in order to succeed. Finally, we get to Putin, who is the current president. We'll talk about some of the reforms that Putin has made that have really been unchecked, centralizing measures to increase the power of the presidency. Continuing with the political structure of Russia today, there's two terms that I want you to make sure that you know, because they really provide the foundation for why and how decisions in Russia's executive branch are made. The first is the idea of soft authoritarianism, which is a system of political control in which a combination of formal and informal mechanisms ensure the dominance of a ruling group or a dominant party. This, in modern-day Russia, would be Putin and his party United Russia. In the past would have been the Communist Party. And this dominance of a ruling group occurs despite the existence of political competition and expressions of political opposition. So oftentimes in class I've heard some of you talking about Putin squashing opposition and people being scared to speak out against the government. And while this is partially partially true. There is some truth to that. It is not against the law for Russians to be against Putin and against the Russian government. However, that doesn't really change the dominance of Putin. So that is soft authoritarianism, kind of related to semi-authoritarianism. So though Russia is technically a democratic state, we could actually call it a semi-authoritarian state because there are elements of democracy mixed into or integrated into a system that seems authoritarian in some other ways. Moving on, Russia has a federal structure. The way the state is organized is federal in nature. This is different from how Great Britain is organized because Great Britain is a unitary state. I want to see if you can kind of draw the differences out yourself. So in Russia, the current regime consists of 83 regions. I'll also refer to these regions as sub-national units. It's important to note that 21 of the 83 regions are ethnically non-Russian by majority. That'll have some significance in a minute. Just recently, the regional governors are not directly elected by citizens any longer. Putin has also created 7 federal administrative districts with individuals that the president approves himself. These people are known as super governors. And I want to bring in this term here that's super important called asymmetric federalism. Asymmetric federalism, well, if you think about the word asymmetry, two things that are not quite equal, I want you to consider this idea of a republic versus a territory and a province. So the 83 sub-national units or regions could be one of these three, have one of these 3 titles. The problem is that republics, if a subnational unit is a republic, it has the right to establish its own language and its own constitution. But territories and provinces, which are different from republics, are not given this right, which means that all 83 of the subnational units or the regions have different levels of autonomy. The reason why I wanted to come back to this idea of the 21 regions that are ethnically non-Russian by majority is that under Yeltsin, the central government was really weak. So many of these regions had to rule themselves anyway, which caused a lot of autonomous feelings, especially in regions that were ethnically non-Russian. This is going to be important when we talk about Chechnya a little later, which is an ethnic minority within Russia that has typically clashed with the Russian majority. We talked during the last class about the 1993 Constitution. I just wanted to hit a couple more important pieces about it since the Constitution is such a large moving part in Russia's political structure. We know that it was ratified by referendum, which is just a popular vote, which tells the central government that the people do trust in the government to be able to carry out the rights and responsibilities of the government as stated by the Constitution, which gives us the legitimacy that Russia so dearly needed after the fall of the Soviet Union. The Constitution also allowed for a 3-branch government. Its executive is actually a dual executive. Russia has a prime minister and a president. They have a lower legislative house, which is called the Duma or the State Duma. And there's also a constitutional court, which does have the power of judicial review. Parts of Russia are parliamentary. Some parts of Russia are presidential. I want you to think about what what parts of the government could be considered parliamentary, what parts could be presidential. Similarly to how the federalism, the concept of federalism is asymmetrical in Russia, the constitution is also considered asymmetrical. The reason for this is that the Constitution allows for a much stronger executive branch than the legislative or judicial branches. So this is illustrated in both Yeltsin and Putin's use of decrees, which carry the force of law. So the idea behind this is that the president has the authority to issue decrees and directives that carry the force of law, and the key here is without legislative review. And we'll go more into detail on that in just a minute. So in the executive branch, which is our focus for today, Russia has a semi-presidential system, which is a form of dual executive where a president and a prime minister divide the responsibilities of the executive branch. The president is the head of state. The prime minister is the head of government. Both of these individuals represent the executive branch. The current president, we know, is Vladimir Putin, and the current prime minister is Dmitry Medvedev. You might recall Medvedev's name because he was elected as the Russian president in 2008, and he nominated Putin as his prime minister. They flip-flopped roles when Putin was re-elected president in 2012. So powers of the president, this is all pretty important stuff. His role to appoint the prime minister and a cabinet. The kind of note here, or asterisk, is that even though the president can appoint the prime minister, the Duma must approve the prime minister's appointment. The president is allowed to serve 2 successive 6-year terms. This was changed recently from 4-year terms to 6-year terms. We could guess who made that change. If you're guessing Putin, you'd be right. We talked about these decrees that presidents are allowed to issue that carry the force of law without legislative review. However, the one check on this power is that the Constitution notes that these decrees should not disregard the Constitution or any other laws. The president also has the power to veto legislation. Additionally, they can dissolve the Duma and call for new elections. For the prime minister, his or her powers, first and foremost, the relationship between the prime minister and the president are not exactly clear. It's not clearly stated in the Constitution. The prime minister is accountable to the Duma. In fact, if the Duma passes 2 repeat votes of no confidence within 3 months, the prime minister can be removed from office and the president would have to make another appointment. The prime minister's power has expanded since Putin became the prime minister in 2008 under President Medvedev. Again, not something that we should be surprised about, since when Putin came into the presidency in 2000, he has made consistent reforms within the government to centralize power within the executive branch. A few other executive bodies that I want to make note of. First, the State Council. The State Council includes all of the regional heads in a more like an advice-giving capacity. They really don't have any real power within the government, but the regional heads do have some sort of voice within the central government. Additionally, there's the Security Council, which operates kind of like a cabinet for the president. He's advised on foreign policy and security. Many of the members of the Security Council come from the FSB, the Security Service, and the Defense Ministry. The Prime Minister also serves on the Security Council, and the super governors, or the leaders of those 7 federal administrative districts, also serve on the Security Council. Finally, we've talked very briefly about state corporatism, and I want to talk about how this represents the executive's hand, kind of mixing into the state economy. So, state corporatism is where the state determines which groups have input into policy making. So, Putin has already said, put his control or inserted his hand into all of the regional governments within the federal system, but this also gives him some weight and some pull within the economic sector. So, the Russian government has some major state owned companies in manufacturing, shipbuilding, nuclear power, diamonds, titanium, and other industries throughout the country. What happens is that if these companies appear to become too independent or too wealthy, Russian government has been known to force sales to either government control companies or to people like the Siloviki, who are all loyal to Putin. This trend is also known as insider privatization, and it is one of the ways that many people in the Western world think that Russia is walking farther away from a market-controlled economy. Some of Putin's reforms that we need to stay on top of. The first should be a familiar term, power vertical. This is Putin's term that he used to describe a unified and hierarchical structure of executive power, which would range all the way from the national level down to the local level, which is shown as in his appointment of regional governors and his appointment of super governors. The super districts, so 7 federal districts, were created to encompass the entire country. Each district was headed by somebody appointed by Putin. This person would supervise local authorities according to Putin's wish. The purpose was to ensure that these regions were complying with federal laws and the Constitution. Putin also appoints regional governors, which ended the direct election of all of the regional governors. Now they're nominated by the president and confirmed by the regional legislatures. Putin also has the power as the president to remove those regional governors. He can remove any governor who refuses to subject local law to the national constitution. So this gives Putin the power of ensuring that the entire country, regional and local and national government, are all on the same page. Putin has also made some changes in the Federation Council. Governors now appoint 1 member to the regional legislature, which is different from how they were elected previously. In the Duma, members were originally elected in single-member districts. However, now the election process has changed to a proportional system of elections, and the threshold for representation in the Duma was raised from 5% to 7%. So just some very important pictures of Putin, just for everyone to see a little bit about what this guy is all about. Here's Putin fishing and flying an aircraft, cuddling with a puppy. This looks like Putin with a Christmas billy goat, practicing taekwondo and swimming with dolphins. So he appears to have a softer side, although he has ensured that there are very few ways to be politically opposed to his policies if you are a member of any regional or national government. However, he's a complex guy that merits complex conversation, which is what we will be talking about on Tuesday. Thank you so much. Don't forget to take the quiz, and I will see you in class.